clicker, mic, slides, students. Looks like we're ready to do this. Okay. So I am absolutely delighted to be here. And I am so grateful to each of you for being here with me today and for being here with all of us today. Today I'm going to talk about how I learned to be a teacher scholar. 3 stories, lessons learned, that's it. So first, we're going to get into a time machine and go back to the 1980s. Fresno, California, San Joaquin Memorial High School, senior year honors English. At the helm is Sister Barbara. And since it's Friday afternoon, she says to us, it's time for writing on demand. I want 4 pages, double-spaced, on Ben Franklin's The Ephemera. Right. And I think to myself, oh, I'm tired. I don't feel like writing, and I don't have any good ideas, and I'm hot. But Sister Barbara has this unique motivational style. She clasps her hands behind her waist, and she walks around the classroom, and she literally gets in the face of every single student, and she says to us, write, 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 write. And so we write. All of us, every single one of us. And by the end of Friday afternoon, we have a completed essay, and it's terrible. But it doesn't matter, because on Monday, we come back, we get our essays, and she says, now we're going to look at these just for gerunds. On Tuesdays, we get them back again. We look for infinitives and varying word choice. And by Thursday, we have a polished draft. But there's no resting on our laurels, because Friday comes up again, and it's time, once again, for writing on demand. So fast forward to now, I've written 1 book, 50 academic articles, and hundreds of scripts and blog posts for LinkedIn and the internet. And I have to say, every single time I sit down to write, I think to myself some variation of, I'm hot, I'm tired, I don't have any good ideas, yet I have found my muse, and I recommend that you find your muse like Sister Barbara, and you just write. And I hear her voice in my head every single time, write, 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 and so I do. The second piece of advice that I wanted to offer is just to remember that all writing is rewriting. So tell your inner critic to just shh, because remember, on Monday, you can look at your essay for gerunds, Tuesday for infinitives, and by Thursday, you'll have your polished draft. Number 2, how I learned to serve. And there's my cue to myself. Here comes the audience participation part. So I'm going to say a word. And when I say that word, I'm going to ask that you allow any feeling or emotion or words just pop into your head, feel them in your body. There's no right, there's no wrong answer here, okay? Once you've done that, then I'm gonna ask that you just quickly turn to a partner, no judgment, and just share what that word or that feeling was, all right? Are we ready? Okay, so the word is, it's very surprising, the word is service. So go ahead, just allow first feeling, emotions, pop in, and then just turn to someone and share it quickly. All right. So, all right, how did that go? It's going. Okay, I like this. So I am going to stop you. And if this were my class, I would probably then facilitate a whole discussion. What did you come up with? But let me just do a quick show of hands. How many of you felt more positive than negative when I said service? Can I just see a show of hands? Okay, it's exactly what I thought, because this is a very dedicated group of people. But was there anyone out there who, when I said that, felt maybe more negative than positive. Okay, a couple of you. All right. So I have to admit that when I began my career, I was definitely in the more negative than positive. I mean, service was like the thing I had to do in order to keep my job so I could keep doing the other stuff I really liked. And when I first arrived here, I was like the person who can't say no to service. I just thought if they asked you to do something, you were supposed to say yes. So I said yes to everything, and then I got really burnt out, and I went into being the person who was ducking, dreading, dodging, denying service, and I just struggled to find my balance. Until about 10 years ago, I participated in the spiritual exercises. And when I participated in the spiritual exercises, I learned about the difference between being pushed and being pulled. And so pushed is that sensation like you should do something, you must do something. It doesn't feel good. It feels like a must. Whereas being pulled is often softer. It feels like an invitation, an excitement. You don't really know how you're going to do it, but you know that you feel inclined towards it. So once I learned about this, I realized that most of the time, it's best to serve where you feel pulled rather than where you feel pushed. And to use a very, very rare sports metaphor for me, it's to be offensive rather than defensive. So seeking out service that you feel has meaning for you. Now I'm going to say exactly the opposite, though. Sometimes it is necessary to also gracefully accept the push. We may look around the room and say, well, if not me, then who? It just must be done. And then number 3, accept that when, then will never happen. So for a large part of my career, I labored under this misconception that when I finished everything on my to-do list, or maybe when I had spare time, then I would do this really compelling, meaningful service. And I realized that when then is never going to happen. So if there's something you want to do it now. And then finally, how I learned to teach. So as I stand before you right now, I've taught at LMU for 20 years. Before that, I was in graduate school and I taught part-time and I made my living as a corporate trainer. So there's a lot I could tell you about teaching. However, I think what I am probably most proud of is my ability to be fully present with my students in the classroom in spite of everything else that might be going on outside the classroom or even for me personally. So I learned this ability from George. So who is George? George was our colleague from accounting. And although I never really knew George well, he was an inspirational mentor for me in terms of how he taught during tough times. So you see, about 12 years ago, I was going through a very difficult personal time. And I was really worried about my ability to teach well. I was so concerned that I would get to class and maybe cry or just forget absolutely everything. So during this time, I actually taught in the same classroom as George, which was Hilton 119. And George had just suffered a terrible loss, and he was grieving. And I would get there early, and I would peer through the window of Hilton 119, and I would just watch George. And I saw George breathing and smiling and talking and living and teaching. And I said to myself, oh my gosh, if George can do this after what he's been through, then I can certainly do the same. So even now, when I've had difficult times, I think about George, and he's a source of inspiration for me. So my lessons learned. Number 1, make your classroom a safe space, a sacred space, a happy place for you and your students. I see my classroom as a refuge, so even when the outside world or your interior world is hurting. Number 2, everything works with teaching. Lectures work, community-based learning works, field-based learning, case studies, simulations, everything works, but nothing works without variety. So take risks and be prepared to be continuously humbled. Every semester, I try new things. Every semester, I have an epic fail or 2 or 3 or more. And I get up and I do it again. Number 3, everything works, but nothing works without joy. So the biggest piece of advice that I give myself and my students is when you're preparing a presentation or a workshop or a class or a talk like this or anything really, find something that you are really excited about sharing. Maybe it's an exercise or an idea or a theory or a concept or a new pair of shoes, something that you're really excited about and that you feel like has meaning. And then finally, if you remember nothing else, it's to be fully present with your students. To conclude, I wanted to share my favorite quote. Work is love made visible, and if you cannot work with love, it is better that you sit at the foot of the temple and take alms of those who work with joy. Working here as a professor is such a privilege. I'm so grateful, and it truly is my expression of love made visible. Thank you.